What is a user story? A user story describes functionality that will be valuable to either user or client of a system or software. User stories are a convenient format for expressing the desired business value for many types of product backlog items, especially features. User stories are crafted in a way that makes them understandable to both business and technical people. User stories should be simple, brief, and clear in description of functionality. They reflect problems, not solutions. Details may appear in sub-stories. User stories are composed of three aspects: a written description of the story used for planning and as a reminder, conversations about the story that serve to flesh out the details of the story, and tests that convey and document details and that can be used to determine when a story is complete. A business requirement becomes a user story when the user story is small, fits on a card, is comprehensible by everyone, has the right size for planning, and encourages participatory design. User story descriptions are traditionally handwritten on paper note cards and has these three C: card, conversation, and confirmation properties. Let me give you some samples regarding user stories. A user can search an application by the following criteria. A user can be authenticated with Facebook API or by registration process. Now let me give you some samples that are not user stories. The application will be written in Java using Spring Framework. Or the business logic layer will connect to the database by using a connection pool that will have some of the following characteristics, etc. Regarding the card attribute, user stories are written directly on a 3 by 5 inch index cards or sticky. The card isn't intended to capture all of the information that makes up the requirement. In fact, we deliberately use small cards with limited space to promote brevity. A card should hold a few sentences that capture the essence or intent of a requirement. It serves as the placeholder for more detailed discussions that will take place among the stakeholders, product owner, and development team. The details of a requirement are exposed and communicated in a conversation among the development team, product owner, and stakeholders. The user story is simple, a promise to have that conversation. The conversation is typically not a one-time event, but rather an ongoing dialogue. There can be an initial conversation when the user story is written, another conversation when it's refined, yet and another when it's estimated, another during sprint planning, when the team is diving into the task level details, and finally ongoing conversations while the user story is being designed, built, and tested during the sprint. A user story also contains confirmation information in the form of conditions of satisfaction. These are acceptance criteria that clarify the desired behavior. They are used by the development team to better understand what to build and test, and by the product owner to confirm that the user story has been implemented to his satisfaction. If the front of the card has a few-line description of the story, the back of the card could specify the conditions of satisfaction. These conditions of satisfaction can be expressed as high-level acceptance tests. However, these tests would not be the only tests that are run when the story is being developed. In fact, for the handful of acceptance tests that are associated with the user story, team will have many more tests at a detailed technical level that the product owner doesn't even know about. The acceptance tests associated with the story exist for several reasons. They are an important way to capture and communicate from the product owner's perspective how to determine if the story has been implemented correctly. So just take all the attributes as are written, independent. As much as possible, care should be taken to avoid introducing dependencies between stories. Dependencies between stories lead to prioritization and planning problems. For example, suppose the customer has selected as high priority a story that is dependent on a story that is a low priority. Dependencies between stories can also make estimation much harder than it needs to be. Negotiable. The details of stories should also be negotiables. Stories are not a written contract in the form of an upfront requirements document. Instead, stories are placeholder for the conversations where the details will be negotiated. Good stories clearly capture the essence of what business functionality is desired and why it is desired. However, they leave room for the product owner, the stakeholders, and the team to negotiate the details. This negotiability helps everyone involved avoid the us versus them finger-pointing mentality that is commonplace with detailed upfront requirements documents. When stories are negotiable, developers cannot really say, "Hey, if you want it, you should have put it in the document," because the details are going to be negotiated with the developers. And the business people can really say, hey, you obviously didn't understand the requirements document because you built the wrong thing. Because the business people will be in frequent dialogue with the developers to make sure there is a shared clarity. Let me talk about some tactics used in written techniques. Write for one user role, avoid plural. Write in active voice. The customer should write, developers are free to suggest. Write short titles. Start with the goal stories for each role. Decompose from there. Slice the cake. Write stories that will deliver end-to-end functionality. Do not split on technical lines. Write close stories that can be accomplished. Balance the 6 attributes of a good user story. Create constraint stories, documenting non-functional requirements, write acceptance tests. Size the story to be implemented in near future. This can be planned and implemented with small effort. Keep user interface out as long as possible, exception of course when the user interface is important to success of the product. Not all requirements need to be user stories, technical interfaces, user interfaces and so on.